Don't do the path that others are asking you to do. Do the path that uh, aligns most intimately with yourself. And so if you're at a place where you don't actually know what you want, this is where you start. Allowing yourself to set aside time to get very clear on what you feel is your heart's mission at this time. And once you lock in and get clarity with it, protect it as much as you can and stay focused on the direction that you're heading into.
Welcome to the Light the Day podcast, where we explore spiritually transformative experiences. I'm your host, Julie Cluff. And as always, I'm going to remind you to like, subscribe, share all the things and help us get the word out and help us to awaken people around the planet. And today I have a special guest, Heather Ivany. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Julie. Nice to be on your program today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this conversation today. Um, well, I'll let you introduce yourself and then we'll go into kind of the background and how you got to where you are right now. But if you'd like to introduce yourself first, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah. So I work primarily as a spiritual mentor and Akashic Record guide. And I also still teach yoga, which is where everything kind of originated from. But my two main focuses right now are supporting people who want to expand their relationship with consciousness. So that can be one on one through mentorship with me, and that can be through exploring the Akashic Records directly in a group setting.
Awesome. I love that. I love that so much. And so let's go back. What was life like for you as a child? Did you have a spiritual background? What was your understanding of spirituality or religion and so forth as you were growing up?
Yeah, growing up, I was raised in a family that was more religious than spiritual. So my background is Catholic. So we were a family that went to church typically each Sunday, and kind of same as everyone else, trying to exit the parking lot as fast as possible once the service was done. And then also went to a Catholic school. So, I mean, it was definitely imprinted often throughout my upbringing. But when I got to, so I always felt very connected to the non physical realm. Where I had a lot of challenges was how that was densified and brought into the human realm. I had a lot of questions around why it felt like men were more revered than women in the Catholic Church, and why it felt like certain capabilities were reserved for kind of the elite or the few or the gifted. So those were things that I, questioned quite intimately in my late teens. And that introduced me into a path of meditation. My meditation started because I went away for university and I was struggling quite a bit with just the overwhelm of adulting by myself across the country. So I got into meditation to help to calm some of the anxiety that I had with that. And that was sort of the opening gateway. From there, I eventually leaned into self teaching myself yoga. I was a firefighter in the summertime, a forest firefighter, and we'd have to stay pretty close to the machine for most of the day. So anything that you could do around the machine, you were able to do. But if you got a call, then you had to go. So this is pre cell phones and the satellite Wi-Fi. So we were playing a lot of hacky sack and doing push-ups, and then I just got myself a yoga book and self-taught. And then the boys that I worked with, they wanted to learn, so I was teaching them in the middle of a field how to do yoga. And so that sort of embarked me into a pathway of becoming a yoga teacher, which was completely satiating for me for probably 15 to 20 years. In that time, I raised 3 children and got married, and so I was juggling work life with family life. And then it was when COVID hit that the gateway kind of opened up for me with the Akashic realm, and that's where I've been ever since.
Wow, that's quite an interesting trajectory. Let's go back a little bit and look at some of this because I love that overview. That really paints a picture. It's an interesting, juxtaposition between yoga and firefighting
Yeah.
and then the meditation, using that to create some calm. So, I'm assuming from your story then that once you left home, it sounds like you went to college, to university, away from your hometown, and I imagine that at that point you kind of did you at that point stop associating with the Catholic Church and just kind of doing your own thing, or did you continue to use the Catholic Church as a
A platform?
vehicle?
Yeah, I think, like, there was no actual breakup for me with the Catholic Church. There was no trauma that happened that made me feel like I had to break up and go in a different direction. It was more just a natural evolution of wanting to expand beyond what the church was offering, and so that was just my own natural personality that wanted to hunt for something more. But I think because I have a great relationship with both my parents, and my dad was deeply invested in the Catholic Church, so what ended up happening is he and I would have very long kinda campfire conversations about him approaching the conversation of consciousness from his perspective with, Jesus and the Catholic Church, and I would present it from a more global oneness spirituality, and we would just have the most, like, for me, fascinating and in-depth conversations. So, there was always, like, a deep respect for the roots from which I came from, but also a recognition that I no longer belonged in that arena. But what I love about it is that it really allowed me, as I carried forward in life, to just have a deep respect for, everyone's background, wherever they come from, and I make it very clear when people come into the Akashic training, like, this is not a conversion in any way. This is taking what you're masterful in and expanding it in a direction that feels personal for you. So there's nothing that has to be left behind, nothing that I mean, even people that come in are welcome that don't believe in past lives. You don't have to align with past lives in order to be able to access the Akashic records. I mean, that's very anti-Catholic Church philosophy. So I'm fine with that.
Right.
So that's what I really appreciate from that upbringing is just that I have a deep respect, reverence, acceptance, and openness to other forms of religion, spirituality, traditional ways of people working with their way, and then just adding to it and
Yeah.
magnifying it. Yeah.
I love that. I love that a lot because I had a similar experience with, the religious, container versus the spiritual, back in the day, I don't know, I think you're much younger than I am, but yeah, back in the day, religion and spirituality were all considered kind of in the same container, while
Yeah.
what I notice is there's people who are very religious, but aren't particularly spiritual, and vice versa, and then there's other people who are religious and spiritual, and I don't think there's a right or wrong. It's just different personalities and different, ways of approaching life. It
Yeah, that was a big, like, opening, like, some of the first you're reminding me of, like, some of the first conversations I would have with my dad would be around that, like, he was like, "I don't really understand what spirituality is, like, religion is spirituality," and trying to separate the 2 was, a conversation that we would have often, and it would really point the mirror back at me to be like, Do I really understand what I mean when I'm sharing that I'm spiritual, and not religious?" So, yeah, I agree 100% that, the spirituality wasn't even separated from religion, I think, intentionally until, like, I'd say the last 30, 40 years maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and maybe even less than that because
Yeah.
if you look at reports and studies, like the Pew studies and so forth, I don't think they started separating that until, like, 20 years ago, 20,
Yeah,
25 years ago, something
I'd
like that,
agree. Yeah,
or maybe not even that long ago, I don't know, but,
yeah.
yeah, it's really fascinating, really fascinating. When and I'm curious your introduction to meditation because as a young person growing up, meditation, yoga, and all of that was seen as, like, way out there,
Mhm.
when I was growing up, and I remember there was a yoga studio not far from my house, um And I mean, I think I was a young ad I'm pretty sure I was, like, married with kids at this point, and there was a yoga studio that was, like, around the corner from my house, and I remember my mom commenting on it like, "Oh, yoga, that's that's scary, that's scary stuff," and it's so mainstream now. So I'm curious what your introduction was to meditation to start with and then yoga.
into the yoga. So the meditation came along because when I came back after my first year of university, I shared with my mom that I wasn't managing well, so we decided to go and see a therapist together. And the therapist actually gave me some hypnosis tapes to take back to school with me.
Oh,
So I
awesome.
would lie down and listen to the hypnotic tapes to help to bring me into a state of calm. And then a roommate of mine, she was like, "Hey, there's a yoga class at the university. Do you want to go and check it out?" And it was, I think we only went once or twice. I don't remember it too much, but we barely moved. It wasn't like the traditional sun salutations and warrior poses. It was a lot of sitting and gentle movements. It wasn't maybe like a soft Kundalini type experience. And then, so that was my intro to meditation. But there was something that clicked when I would do the hypnotic tapes and how I would feel afterwards and how I was able to manage life. So I was like, there's an energetic spiritual component that I'm missing here. I've always been very kinesthetic, very physical, had that sort of health component locked in. It's easy for me to manage a lot in the mind. So this was the part that wanted a little bit more of my attention. When I moved into the yoga, same thing. It was not mainstream at all. It was still very much like, there might be an ashram or 2 in a city and maybe like a class or 2 at like a YMCA, but not much going on. So when I was self-teaching from a book, it was mostly because I was like, I'm tired of doing push-ups. I want to do something else while I'm just killing time. And a girlfriend of mine was like, you should get this book. It was called, I think it's called Yoga for the Everyday by Linda Sparrow. And it was just like sequences for your cycle and sequences when you feel energized and sequences when you need to rest. And it was all very beautifully laid out with pictures.
Mm.
And so I would practice these sequences, and it combined the part of me that loved to teach as well as the part of me that loved to be physical. So when I moved first into it's so funny to look back on. So when I applied for yoga teacher training that fall, so after the fire season, and I stepped into that yoga studio. First of all, that was the very first time in my life that I stepped into a yoga studio was to start a teacher training. So I hadn't even been to
Wow.
an actual class before.
That's very brave.
What's that?
That's very brave.
Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't know, I was just more naive, like, I just didn't even know that this was a whole thing. So, I grew up in kind of a conservative Alberta town, and I was going out to, like, Victoria, which is in, like, by Vancouver, BC. So, this is
Okay.
way more forward thinking than where we were at in Hicktown, Alberta.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so I didn't even know it was a thing that people, like, got, like, yoga passes and did yoga classes. But then when I was in my teacher training, I just loved to sit back and see how everything beautifully was coming together. So, like I had a teaching background that gave me a lot of confidence going into the teacher training because a lot of people really struggled when they had to get up in front of people and actually like talk through a class, and that for me was pretty comfortable. But then I didn't know that there was a philosophy component to yoga. So when we're learning about the philosophy, then I had these notes to compare it to the Catholic Church because it's similar to Hindu and Buddhism that they get their teachings from the Sanskrit. So like yoga predates Buddhism and Sanskrit, or sorry, Buddhism and Hinduism. So their religious teachings come from the philosophies of yoga. And so I could see a lot of similarities between how I grew up and how these religions were teaching. So that was a comfortable blend for me. The parts that I found fascinating was, like, I was like, "Oh, I didn't realize that when we're doing these poses, we're meant to be really unifying the mind, the body, and the soul in the practice of yoga." And that, for me, is how the energy of consciousness became embodied in my cells, and as soon as that clicked, that's when I started to just, like, really feel like I was landing in myself and really feeling like I was at a place where, life was starting to make sense. It wasn't like I was changing hats all the time. I could actually lean into this one, style of life, and it complemented all the other arenas of myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
that's really
yeah, it was
interesting.
beautiful.
Yeah. It's curious to me that because I think that was one of the things that I was warned about, back in the day, like
Yeah.
going back in time. One of the things I was warned about was, oh, this isn't just exercise. This is a philosophy. This is a religion. Like you're practicing a religion by doing yoga. And I think, sometimes I think of yoga and going to like a yoga studio, some of them, not all of them, but some of them, it almost feels like, if we order Mexican food in the States versus when we eat Mexican food in Mexico, it's a different experience. And I'm curious what you found. Did you find any conflict between your kind of former way of thinking and the philosophies that you were learning in yoga?
Absolutely, but I feel like, I was very divinely guided to work with the particular teacher that I worked with because that concept of the dogmatic attitude towards yoga didn't come until after my training. So she was
Interesting.
very much like, "This is not religion. Religion has its roots in yoga, but yoga itself is not religion." So can you hear the nuance in that a
Uh,
little bit?
Very
Right?
cool. Uh-huh.
And she was like, "This will augment and complement any field of practice that you align with and, amplify it." So the way that I sort of, think about that, if you're familiar at all, like, with essential oils, like a frankincense oil, what makes that the divine masculine oil and what makes it such a strong support oil is that you can pair it with any other oil. So you pair it with lavender for sleep, it'll augment sleep. You pair it with a licorice root for digestion, it will augment the digestive qualities. And so that's how yoga was really shared with me was like, this will augment and expand anything that you apply it towards. So there was no request for me to adjust myself to fit
Mm,
into the mold of yoga so that I could be accepted. It was always let the practice work on you, don't work the practice. Don't mold yourself into the practice, let the practice mold you, and so that's what I carried forward when I came out, and when I would find myself in situations where I'd be in front of teachers that were very stoic and regimented as, like, there's only one way and this is the only way, it was just a clear red flag for me to not go back and stay with the teachers that really allowed the personal expression of oneself to come through in the practice.
that's beautiful. I love that so much, and that's a beautiful way of looking at it. And I hope my questions didn't seem like I was trying to make something of it that it wasn't, but it was just like just out of curiosity. Just knowing the experience that I had with hearing different people talk about these practices, and I enjoy yoga as well, so it's not
Yeah, no,
uh,
your question felt curious, not confrontational or challenging in any way.
yeah,
No, you said it
yeah,
beautifully. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Um I do like to get into the nuances of things because I think there's people listening with all kinds of different backgrounds, and so when we can kinda talk about the different backgrounds and how does this blend with this and how does that blend with that, it really helps all of us kind of open our mind and our heart to a lot of different, ways of looking at the world, which I think is really beautiful.
Yeah, and what you're doing, which is beautiful, that not normally happens in interviews, is usually people will ask the backstory and then they'll kinda, like, skip over all those parts and then be like, "Okay, now let's get to the Akashic Records," and what you've done is you just retracted a little bit and broken it down, so it just creates a wider lens of where we're going, and yeah, I think you're the way that you get curious and want to kind of figure out the how did that arrive from A to B, it's yeah, it's beautiful to be in your company right now.
Thank you. Um, this movement from university to firehouse to yoga. Like, that's a, pretty unique pattern. And from what you said, it sounds like you started practicing yoga while you were still a firefighter, and you were introducing this to these other people that you were working with. What was their reaction to it? It sounds like you had a good response overall.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure looking back if it was like a genuine, sincere interest or almost like a like, don't get me wrong, we had like 10 to 12 hours a day of just hanging around within 100 feet of a helicopter in the middle of a field. So it could have just been utter boredom that was like, all right, just teach us some yoga. We need something else to do here. But they were so great. So they actually approached me because I would be kind of off on my own doing what I was doing. And then this guy one day, he was like, well, would you teach me? And I'm like, "I can, but I'm just, like, self-teaching as we go." And then he was like, "Well, just teach all of us." So it was actually, like, the whole crew was guys other than me, so I was, like, kinda like the little Smurfette on the pod. So yeah, so we the first time and it was just comedy. I mean, it wasn't, like, serious. So, I mean, I would stand and we'd go into triangle pose, and that was, like, my first real, viewpoint of just the difference between the female body and the male body. I mean, triangle pose for most women is a pretty, not basic, but it's a adaptable pose that we can get into, and then to watch men try and lean in on that side angle and just be totally sideways and buckled knees and bent elbows. It was just and so I was just like, I don't know how to correct you, but all I know is that I can teach you the steps that I've kind of memorized from what's come in here. But what I really just enjoyed was breathing together. Like we would breathe together and it was a slower pace than what I was used to. It was very gentle, but the surprising side effect was also underneath that how complicated and challenging it was. I mean, these are like strong men and women that would punch out 50 to 100 push-ups and sit-ups without even blinking. And then you put them in a triangle pose and they're sweating bullets and like just excruciatingly painful. And so that to me was like such an eye-opening experience to have that. So from there, what ended up happening is I got so kinda turned on by the teaching of just to this small group that I was like, "I think I actually wanna do a teacher training." And so I looked at, where there was some that were happening and that the one that I picked just had, like I literally just went onto the website. I think I had 3 to pick from in the area at the time. That's how many studios were between Vancouver and Victoria. And that just had, like, a temperament that just felt right for me, so, I moved to Victoria that fall and spent the fall in Victoria, and it was lovely. I didn't work during that time, so our training was on the weekend, and then during the week, we were, expected to just take classes during the week. So I would walk to and from the studio, so my whole pace of life slowed down. I'd walk there, take a class in the morning, come home, have lunch, do some studying, go back in the evening for a second class, and this was my life. It was almost like a sabbatical. I didn't know anyone in town. The man that I was dating at the time that's now my husband, he lived off the island in Abbotsford, so he would come in and visit on the weekends, but I had a lot of solo time to really integrate, to really play, to really get to know this practice so that by the time I took it and went back to my communities and started teaching it, it felt very embodied. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you go back to firefighting after your teacher training, or
I
did
did
you?
1 more year, but, it did change, the part that I kinda skipped over in my upbringing is I'm the youngest of 3 and I have 2 older brothers, so the part of me that wanted to be more girly and feminine just wasn't allowed out when I was young, and then I learned in my teen years I was very much in well, it's a life process for me to try and drop the masculine energy. It's very easy for me to override into my masculine. So that process of going through the yoga teacher training really started to soften me into the feminine, so that by the time I went back and did, my firefighting season the next year, it just wasn't for me anymore. So I did that last summer and then I was done. Uh, and then it's interesting, I really felt like I dropped into my feminine and I taught yoga for many years, and it's so interesting, like, just now in the time that you and I are speaking, I've just recently been, diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease, and the interesting, learning that I'm doing through this is that, on an energetic level, autoimmune is all about how the parts of ourselves that are asking for attention, they're not receiving it, and they're constantly being asked to sit down, to sit down, to sit down until eventually they just rise with like this fire and just express through inflammation. And so as I'm going through this healing process, I'm really getting shown once again how my masculine energy has found another way to be able to lead, and my feminine is like had enough. And so what I thought was a slow pace of life that I was living, I'm being asked to like really drop it another 3 or 4 degrees and really spend some introspective time of like, what is it that wants to be expressed that I'm not allowing? And I would consider myself someone who knows thyself. And so this has been a real humbling, bit of a shock for me to just really be put back into a place that I felt that I was dropped into in my early 20s, now as I'm sort of breaching into my 50s.
Yeah. Fascinating and personally very, instructive and very interesting because, I've struggled with the same thing, autoimmune and so forth over the years and struggled with the balance of the masculine and the feminine and so forth, and really, was strongly in my masculine energy for many, many years and have really dropped as much as, we can't totally drop. It's not about dropping masculine or feminine, it's more about balancing that in a more, balanced way, and,
Yeah.
so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that very personal aspect of your experience. So when did the Akashic Records come along? How did that get introduced to you? And, what caused you to kinda move in that direction then?
Yeah. So, about probably 15 to 20 years into teaching yoga, there was just a point where I felt like I'd reached kind of an edge point with the teaching in the sense, so if you teach yoga teacher trainings, there's a curriculum guideline that you have to follow, and so in order to get like the number of hours that students need in order to be certified, there's certain criteria and curriculum that you have to meet, which is understandable, of course, and it makes you have to, choose between, anatomy and physiology or deeper philosophy. You have to have so many hours in each of the components of it. So I felt very confined, working out of this particular system. My heart really wanted to be more in the metaphysical. It wanted to be more in the experience of the practice, not so much the physical component of the practice. So that was sort of like an internal hunger or wanting, like I want to go deeper, but I don't know how. And then with teaching yoga classes, there's only so far you can go in an hour. So I was like, I feel like I want to be going deeper and further with clients, with myself, and I don't really know how, but I sort of had that petition out there in the universe. And then when COVID hit and everything shut down, both me and my husband were at home, so I actually met him in the field. He was a helicopter engineer, so he's in aviation, I'm in health and wellness. Both our industries were shut down. So we were home, with the kids for, days on end, and so it really allowed me opportunity to go deeper into my own practice, and it was, through several nights of just meditating in general where, a particular woman's name kept coming to mind. I knew who she was. She was a childhood family friend that I hadn't seen in many years, but I ran into her the summer before. And she shared with me then, she's like, "Oh, I'm, doing Akashic Records." And she gave me her business card and I tucked it into my wallet and never really thought about it again. And
Mhm.
so her name came up 3 times in a row in meditation, and that's enough for me to sort of be like, "Okay, I'll take the hint and reach out." So I simply sent an email and just said, "You've come up in meditation. I'm not sure what it's about, but I have a feeling you'll know how to take it from here." And she lovingly replied back. She's like, "This is how I advertise. I have, my energies and frequencies speak to the energies and frequencies of people that are meant to work with me, and they guide them in through many different ways. And so for you, it was through meditation. She's like, so let's maybe start with an Akashic reading. So in the Akashic reading, similar to what you were sharing before we hit record, in that you're doing an Akashic training, but you're learning. You got the hit that you're moving into channeling. Well, I was doing an Akashic. Did I say that correctly? Was that how
Yeah,
it came out
uh-huh.
for you? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so for me, it was I'm doing an Akashic reading, and she's in the reading with me saying, you work with the Akashic records fluently. You're just not doing it consciously. You're doing it subconsciously. And if you want, we can work together to bring it more into the conscious realm. And that was mind blowing to me because I still kind of lived in that sort of world of some people were gifted with certain energetic capacities and some people weren't. And so you either had it or you didn't. And I'd never really thought of myself as being one that could do this type of work, if you want to call it that, or vocation. So she pointed out the different ways that I was already working with it. So, for example, when I teach yoga, I will language in such a way when I'm walking around a room where it's almost as though the words that are coming out of my voice are coming from a place that's beyond me. They're more poetic, or they're more inclusive and communal, and kind of weaving people's energies together. And I'll sometimes be teaching and almost be like observing myself saying some things, and wondering where that's coming from. And then after class, someone might come up and say, like, "It felt like you're inside of my head, like, what you were saying just really resonated, and I need to hear that today." So, these were ways that I was subconsciously working with the Akashic Records, and so together with her, we brought it more to the surface, and it really took off, as soon as I started. There was a huge hesitation in me because I live in BC, but I live in a small town in British Columbia. It's a mountain ski town. Big into type A personalities, lots of fly fishing and skiing and mountain biking and hiking, and really high energy individuals. So yoga is accepted because it's a physical practice, and it's totally mainstream now. But for me to offer Akashic record readings, I was like, nobody's going to come to this. Like,
Yeah.
this is not something that people even know what it is, let alone will they pay for it. And so with my teacher, she was like, she went into the records with me, and she was like, call it what it is, because you're going more international. You're not doing this just as a local thing. So call it what it is so people can find you. And it was literally within a few months that someone suggested reaching out to podcasts, and seeing if I could come on as a guest teacher. And then that's just where it exploded. And so yeah, so now I teach internationally. I mean, I'll maybe do half a dozen local readings a year, but all of my work is more international. So it's just interesting how it just kinda starts to unfold in those breadcrumb kind of ways. So it wasn't like I was actively hunting for it, I was more just really searching for more depth, more meaning, more connection, and this was how it came back at me, and I really kinda dug in my heels a bit initially, and I was like, "That's too extreme, I don't wanna go there, it's too, like, too woohoo," but then I just owned it and went for it. Yeah.
Yeah. For those who aren't familiar with the Akashic Records, can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so Akasha is a Sanskrit word. This is what I find so fascinating. It still has roots in yoga, right? So this is the beauty of it. Like, in all my 20 years, I never worked with the Akashic Records. I knew it was somehow connected, but I never worked with it. And then boom, here's like the extension of the tree branch moving now in this direction, but it still has its roots from where I originated from. So Akasha is a Sanskrit word. Um, it gets interpreted into either space or spirit. So if you go with the definition of space, that's going to take you into quantum. Quantum field, or the quantum physics, is the study of everything, and space is everywhere. So if you're more science based, then that's kind of a great angle to come in with. If you understand just even conceptually that what the quantum field is, the akasha is the quantum field. And then if you're more spiritually minded, akasha also translates into spirit, and spirit is consciousness. So akasha is the study of consciousness. It's the big umbrella that encases everything that is. And then when we go into the akashic records, that is the GPS signal or the old school radio signal of someone's particular frequency within the Akasha. So every form of consciousness has its own Akashic record, its own frequency. So the way that you can have a phone and someone can locate you by just checking your location on a phone through the GPS coordinates, it's the same way in the etheric realm with someone's Akashic records. So all humans have an Akashic record, plants, animals, even something that doesn't feel like alive, like a business, it has an Akashic record because in order for that business to move from the etheric realm into the physical realm, it has to densify through a person or individuals. So it will have its own Akashic records that's connected to either the individual business owner or the business partners that are connected to it. Land will have an Akashic records. A house will have an Akashic record. So anything that has consciousness has an Akashic record connected to it. So it's incredibly vast. And so why we have an opening mantra is just to really focus in on opening up the field for this one particular form of consciousness and see what's available for us to get information and data from.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. And then share a little bit about, I've studied this to a certain extent, certainly could not explain it as well as you just did. That was beautiful. But explain a little bit about like opening the records and closing the records and what that process is and why you even have that process.
So everyone has so there's a few things. So sometimes before I even open a record, I will check to see if I need to banish. And banishing isn't always eradicating the evil dark lords that are hovering around us all the time. Banishment is just like clearing static, right? So like all day long we're accumulating other people's energies and being influenced by noise pollution and environmental things. And so when we banish, it's like that ginger you have after the wasabi when you're eating sushi. It just clears the palate, it puts a clean slate so that now when you go to open up someone's records, it's just a hollow tube that you're moving through to get to someone's akashic field. So banishment's great. It's just a great way to clear static, clear noise. Sure, sometimes you're removing what we would call negative or dark. I don't really call it that. But mostly what we're doing is just like offering a clean slate. So sometimes I'll start with a banishment mantra just to clear everything out. Then when we go to open, it's like it's like mantra in that like when you sing or repeat a phrase over and over again, it creates a resonant, it creates a well-grooved path that makes it easy for others to come in and align with. So you know the energy of when you stand in a stadium and the whole stadium sings a national anthem, or when you stand in a church and everyone sings Amazing Grace, or when you are at a rock concert and everyone's singing Coldplay, like whatever it is, when many, many souls come together and they resonate in the same frequency, it creates a very potent experience. So that's what an opening mantra is. If I change it up every time I'm doing it, it makes it almost like a cacophony. It makes it almost scattered energy. So by having the same system each time I go in, it's like a well grooved goat trail. That's like, okay, Heather's opening up the record. She's going in. So using the opening mantra makes it very clear, very focused, very potent as to like, this is what we're doing right now. We are opening Julie's records or Sam's records. And from there, there's everyone has clairs. So clairs are your senses in physical form, so sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, that get lighter when we move into the experience of the non-physical realm, and they lighten from a sense in a physical form to a clair in a lighter form. So your sense of sight becomes clairvoyant, and your sense of hearing becomes clair audio, and so on and so forth. So everyone has clairs because everyone has senses. So those listeners that are like, "Oh, I'm not gifted and I can't do it." I challenge you on that because if you have a sense, then you have a clair. And so where I work with people is helping them to identify which clairs are strongest for them so that they can use that as their agency to be able to access the non-physical realm, the Akashic realm, with more uh, success, intention, and integrity. So for example, my strongest clair is not clairvoyant, which is surprising to a lot of people with the Akashic Records because everyone has a stereotype that the Akashic Records is a visible library, an etheric library that people see, and when you see this magical holy library, then you can have access to the Akashic Records. The reality is that you can enter the Akashic Records through clairsentient, which is feeling, claircognizance, which is knowing, clairaudio, which is hearing. So for me, my two strongest clairs are clairsentient and claircognizance. I have a knowing and I have a felt sensation of things. Clairvoyance there, but it's just not as strong. And so when you're doing the opening mantra, I'm allowing my personal like agency of reference, my point of view of my clairs to be able to align with the frequency that I'm trying to connect to, and it forms like a plug going into a socket. Like they connect and they align together. And once I open up someone's records, there's a beautiful moment where we're given opportunity to just bathe in the brilliance of this beautiful light and just do nothing. And so I spend usually the first 5 minutes and even longer just describing someone's field to them, and how their personal field wants to be expressing itself to them at this time. And then we'll start to go in the direction that they wanna go. Some people have an agenda, some people don't. Sometimes the records will have its own, agenda that it wants to bring in, so we're just kind of following the spontaneous way that we wanna have the session unfold. And then we do different things. Sometimes we do forgiveness, sometimes we clear contracts, sometimes we look at people's clairs, sometimes we look at purpose, sometimes we're looking at relationships, sometimes we're trying to figure out how to get the business going. And then once we're done, we close it so that there's not a lot of open antennas, open tabs on a computer, if you wanna think of it that way, as they're moving throughout the rest of their day. We just close it up, we seal it, we give gratitude and thanks, and then we move on from there.
Beautiful. You know, it sounds to me like when you're doing that opening, it feels like you're putting intention and attention
Yeah.
into that space with a mantra, um with a plan, with a purpose, with clarity, because you're using the same process each time. So it creates, like you said, it creates this intention of this is what we're doing, and it creates almost like a a highway entryway into that space. It's interesting as you were talking, you talked about, like, the records might have something specific. A lot of times in the training that I took, there was a lot of focus on the Akashic record, um leaders or teachers, or I can't even think of the terms right now, but, you know, the guides within the Akashic records. Do you find yourself, like, going directly to the records? Do you find yourself connecting with, like, guides within the records? What does that look like for you?
It's both, and it will be very, personalized when I do each session. So, how I sort of look at it is, like, there's a, almost like a protective energy around everyone's Akashic field that is kinda like the overall bouncer, if you will, as to, like, what gets to be in here and what doesn't. Because there is sometimes when I've gone to open someone's records and they don't open. So I can't actually get access to it. And so there's a little bit of tunneling that we have to do there together. Like for some reason, their records is compromised. So there's background, there's other work that we need to do to clear and release before we open up their records. And for me, that's like the governing body of the Akasha, the energy of protection of the Akasha. That's like, whoa, 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 whoa. We're not going to open this up because it's volatile or it's not a good time to open it up. We need to do some things before we open it. So I'll follow those breadcrumbs if that happens. That happens very rarely, I will say, like 6 times in, like, the 7 or 8 years that I've been doing this. Then, once I'm in someone's records, everyone has their own personal, team that works with them. So some people call them their guides and teachers. Some people call it their soul family. Some people call it the energetic frequencies. I usually try and use more generic terms so that it creates a more welcoming space. So I usually will say energies and frequencies so, rather than your spirit team because I don't know what people's backgrounds are, right? So I just
Mhm.
try and keep it more neutral. But when I'm asking if someone has a question or a topic that they want to go into, sometimes I will actually have to pause and be like, are we accessing this through the guides and energies that work with him, or are we going into the akasha itself? Like, are we going into the keepers of the records itself? And sometimes I'll go to the keepers, and sometimes I'll be like, no, work with our guides and teachers. And I'm like, okay, so I do, and I don't know why it does that, but that's just my method. And sometimes I just need to ask it to a specific group that works with them, and sometimes I need to ask it more to the keepers of the records. But I just get, like, guided as to not guided, more, because I find that's, like, a loose term. I will get sort of paused and told, like, "Do it through this channel or do it through that channel," as I'm moving through someone's records with them. And some people only have, like, one guide that works with them, and sometimes I go in and it's like a stadium full of energies and frequencies that work with them. So that also is very, dependent on the individual and how their soul's choosing to express itself in this lifetime. Yeah.
Very interesting. When you're in the Akashic Records, are you primarily looking at because when we think of records,
Yeah.
we think of, like, recorded information about something that's already happened. So when you're in the Akashic Records, are you more looking at historical information that will give them insight into what's happened and why and so forth? Or is it wider than that? Are you looking at, you know, history, future, present? I'm just curious what your experience is from that point of view.
I'll say, like, every practitioner is different, like, same way that, like, in every field, people usually have a niche that kinda aligns with them. So there are people that work with the Akashic Records that specifically do past life regression, and they will go into previous lifetimes with people. I work mostly with present moment, supporting people with understanding very clearly what their incarnated purpose is at this time and how they can align with that more fully. So if we need to go into a previous lifetime to grab a wisdom teaching from that lifetime and bring it into present moment and share it with them, or to grab a mastery that they had in that lifetime and bring it into present moment, we will. And we can go the other way. We can go into the future version of them that is already accumulated what it is that they're hungry for and ask them, what are the steps that they did at this time in this present moment that helped to put them on the trajectory for where they are in their elder self. So you can go into past, you can go into future for that. And then what makes it kind of kind of interesting is like the field that we're talking about has no time or space.
Mhm.
And yet when we densify it and we talk about it in the 3D form with our cognitive brain, the only way the brain makes sense is through opposition. So we have to put it into a timeline of past, present, and future so that the brain can understand what we're doing and it can stay on the train ride that we're having with it. But essentially, just reminding folks that it's all happening at once. It's like that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's that sort of an experience. So even if I'm working with present and I say other people work with past life regression, it's literally the same moment in time repeating
Mhm.
itself, right? And then to answer your question about like a library book and a recording of things. So this is where you can go either quantum or you can go metaphysical. So in the quantum field, this air around us is not mundane and empty. It's rich with vibrational energy that has so many different forms of availability for us to access, right? So if you want abundance, you can pull in abundance. If you want love, you can pull in love. Like there's so many ways that you can work with the quantum field around you to support, heal, fix, amplify, whatever it is that you want to do. That's because this field is imprinted with so many different frequencies that we have the ability to align with or not align with. And so, same with someone's. So then you take that, and for a lot of people, myself included, quantum physics is not easy to comprehend. It's very elusive and mathematical and hard to sort of visualize. So how we make it more visually comprehensible is then we put it into the Akash as a library, and your Akashic Records is a book within that library. And when you pull that book off the shelf and the keepers of the record open up that books with you, this is the other thing the keepers do. They don't just protect, they help to delineate the information, distill it as it comes through. Because if you think about the entirety of your timeline, there's so much information in there. So if I just open up someone's records, it's almost like opening up a stuffed closet and everything just kind of tumbles down on you. Whereas when you open up someone's records and it's just kind of held in this space and it's like, here's where we'd like to go into, then a thread of that energy comes down and we're allowed to play with it so that we don't get overwhelmed with all the data that's contained in someone's book. So the book itself contains the timeline, and then you're literally flipping to a particular chapter, reading a particular paragraph, and within that's a sentence of the information that you're working on with someone on that day. So for people that need more of a picture way to understand it, that's why that etheric library is so good. But what's happened is this symbolic explanation has become gospel for how we access, and that's where I feel it needs to be cleaned up a little bit. You don't have to visually see a library in order to access the records.
Yeah, yeah, very well said, very well said. And in your work in this field, do you primarily work as a reader, or do you primarily work as a teacher, or do you do both, or what is your work in this field?
For now, I do both. I find like offering readings for people gives them an opportunity to experience me a little bit deeper to see if they want to come along with me and do the Akashic training. And for some people, it's simply a reading and they're good and they're complete and they leave. So I find the Akashic readings are a lovely entrance point for a lot of people that are curious about wanting to read the Akashic records, but maybe feel intimidated by it or feel like they're not sure if they can read it or not. So we can get a lot of information through their records about how that relationship can grow and expand if they want to continue working with me. And it's not obligatory. So if someone just wants to have an Akashic reading and one and done be done, that's great. Others not necessarily want to read the records per se, but they want to be able to expand their relationship with consciousness. Then we move into one-on-one mentorship together, and that again is a very personalized program, and we'll work together for about 8 weeks, just really identifying where they're blocked, where their beliefs are holding them back, ways that they can amplify the parts of them that want to grow and expand and have deeper access to their clairs. So there's lots of different ways that it can come together.
I
Uh,
gotcha.
but I love to teach. So like it's really like my heartbeat to be like to watch someone come in and be like, "Oh, this is for others, not for me." And then by the end be like, "Holy shit, I'm like fluidly reading the Akashic records. Like I never thought that this would happen." That to me is like such a gift to be able to witness. So I do love that
Isn't it?
aspect. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Earlier when you were talking about this idea of, banishment, like, banishing the energy that's not the individual so that what it made me think of is like, I don't know. Let's say it's a banana split and you're reading the banana and you've got to, separate the banana from the rest of the banana split in order to read just the banana. That's a silly way of putting it,
It's a great way.
but that's what it made me think of, and as you're talking, it really feels like the work that you're doing in the Akashic Records is you're helping people align with their purpose, like, the reason that they're here, realigning with, "Hey, I'm the banana, I'm not the whole split," like, that is a part of my experience, but it's not who I am. And so, helping people to realign with the purpose that they came here with
Yeah.
and, eliminate anything, the distractions and to get clear and build courage and build direction in that way. Does that sound like am I describing that in the way that you would describe
Yeah,
it?
you
Or
could be my marketing agent. That'd be great. Yeah. Come on board and let's go to work together. Yeah, no, that's perfect how you described it. And what I find is like when people are struggling with this is there's so many fascinating things that come through in the training, but like when people are struggling to be able to access the Akashic records, it's what I find interesting in this current state of technology is it's not so much whether someone has the capacity to be able to get their clair to connect. It's more to do with their ability to stay present. So it requires exactly what you said. Like when you're focusing on the banana, it's a focused presence on banana. And so when people are like, what do I need to do to prepare for the Akashic training? Usually, it's like stay with all the practices that you're doing, like whatever practices you have that you use, that's your technique, use it. If you're a runner, go run. If you're a meditator, meditate. If you're qigong, qigong it. However, bring more presence to what you're doing because that will be probably the game changer for most people in the ability to have fluency and smoothness with opening up the records because we think it's so easy to stay present, to do a 2 to 3 minute tune in, to ground and center, and then to open up someone's Akashic records. That's usually about 5 minutes that will take to do that process. And it's amazing where the mind will ping in that time. So you're getting a concentrate of energy coming in, and then you get pinged out, and it's almost like you need to start over again. So a lot of people, it's not so much working on their clairs, it's working on their presence to be able to stay in the capacity to not get distracted, exactly what you said, by the ice cream or the chocolate syrup of the sundae or the banana split, and just really stay focused with where you're going. And then to add another layer to that, where the belief systems will come in, is because so many of us have our roots in religion that very beautifully tries to teach humility, which in its roots for me, humility means I don't know. It's the space of I don't know. But humility has been manipulated into I'm not worthy. And this is how a lot of people understand humility. And so, if we come from a background of religion that emphasizes deeply humility in the form of unworthiness, a lot of people, it's not that they can't stay present, it's that when they're in the felt sense of that energy frequency, they don't feel worthy to be held in that space and they will self sabotage and check out before they can get in. And so, it's teaching people how to titrate and expand the state of consciousness and be able to be in that space for a longer period than what's comfortable. For a lot of people, it's 5 seconds and then they're out. So can we stay for 30 seconds? Can we stay for a minute? So this is what I love about it is that it's a group experience, but it's so personalized because Jane's working on her belief system of worthiness and Jack's working on being able to be present and Judy's working with like her clairsentient that's so strong that won't even let her claircognizance have a voice. And so there's so everyone just has their own little thing that I'm just like pew 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 pew, like just like seeing the blind spot and pulling it out. But yet we're all growing together because we're learning by witnessing how someone else is working with themselves through the process and using that as data to support their own experience through it.
Yeah, I love the way that you explained humility because that certainly was my experience in religion versus like the I don't know is just like this space of openness
Mhm.
versus this space of like I am nothing.
Mhm.
And that is or I'm not worthy, which is so in many ways very similar concept. And I noticed that as I worked with people and as I work with people first in grief because that was my original field was working in grief. It was almost like and I've struggled to really explain this, but it feels very similar to what you're describing in that I would I would often see the silhouette of the person within all the muck that was layered upon them.
Aw, yeah.
And there's just, like, so much muck that's layered upon us in this experience here, and what you're sharing is profound because it's this idea of, like, let's, step outside of the muck and get realigned, get reacquainted, get, um, in this space where we are reexamining why you're here, why you feel drawn to do XYZ versus ABC,
Mm,
and
yeah.
all of that. So I think that's, fabulous. So as you are a lot of times you're working with an individual person, but as you work with the Akashic Records in the collective, what does that look like for you? Like, if we were to ask some questions right now of kind of the collective, like,
Mhm.
what are we doing as a human family and how are we doing and so on and so forth. Is that something that you're comfortable doing, or is that something that's kind of outside of the realm of the Akashic Records?
No, it's super, in the realm. So when we move through the training, we do part 1, which is learning how to read your own records, right? And then you go away for 2 weeks and you practice and play on your own. Then we come back in and now it's like, now let's play with the others. So you learn how to read the Akashic records for others, and then you go away and you do practice sessions. And then my favorite part, because just only because it's the most fun and joy, like by this time all the tension's gone. So when we come in and do part 3, now it's like, okay, now we're going back into the connective field. So we can go into the Akashic records of anything. And so people get to put in their like top 3 areas that they want to go into. So some people are like, I want to do plants. Some people are like, I want to do water. Some people are like, I want to go into planetary energy. So yeah, the collective energy is one that we go into as well. So we can go into it if you want to. If you want to spend a few moments and go into a particular more broad topic and see what's there, I'm totally open to it if you have time.
Yeah.
And yeah, we can see what's there and what wants to come through.
Yeah, if we could spend just a few minutes, doing that, that would be really, I think, really fascinating.
Sure. So let me just sort of give a little bit of context just for yourself and listeners. So what we're doing is we're going to go into, you want to go into the collective, like collective as in
Yeah, just kind
humanity
of
or collective as in the
as in
universe?
sorry, I missed what you said.
Do you want to go into like the collective of humanity or like the collective of everything? Like, what do you mean by collective?
Humanity,
Humanity. Okay.
and yeah.
So then what we're going to do is we're going to go into that big range of humanity, but because I'm opening the records with you, we're gonna use you as sort of like the bouncing point of like what direction we're gonna go in, because it's a very broad topic. So as we start to tunnel in, I will ask you, does this make sense to you? Because I'm opening up the records for humanity, but I'm opening it up almost for you to have more greater insights and clarity around it. So I will bounce off you. Does that make sense? Yes or no?
Yes.
And because it doesn't have to make sense to me, it just has to make sense to you. And
Yeah.
we'll probably do a little bit of both just because we're in such a broad topic. Okay.
Yeah. Sounds great.
All right. So my process is I'll do a few minutes of just a little grounding and centering. I'll probably banish and then I'll open, and then we'll see where we go. Okay.
So one of the things that I have heard or experienced is this idea that those who are, for lack of better words, awakened, that there's a enough people who are consciously awakened that the that we can move forward into creating a new earth. Um, when I say that, what is the reaction from the Akashic records regarding that concept or that idea?
So when you first shared it, it was like the new Earth is being created regardless. Like we are on like a point where what we've known is no longer, and a new Earth is being created. But the version, what I'm getting is the version of, what you might be sensing or feeling of what we would call, like, more positive or encouraging or uplifting. That is one, version of it, but, like, the bigger point is the new earth is being created. It is absolutely being created. It's just still like clicking into place as to what that new earth is. Okay.
Okay.
So, new earth to you, that might be positive, would look one way, but from someone else's perspective, that's not a positive way of the earth existing and being. So it's just everyone's viewpoint is going to be different on it. So it's hard to almost use that languaging of like yeah, the for the awakened individuals to create a more harmonized, collective, connected energy that feels like a very beautiful vibrational energy for most of us to lean into.
Mm.
People that are very power hungry and used to having things all to themselves, that's a very scary and intimidating future to lean into. Do you see what I'm saying there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So that's where it's like, do you wanna get more specific? Do you wanna keep it
So
broad? It's up to you.
yeah, so within this framework, we still have the capacity as individuals to create from our own perspective and our own thought patterns. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, 100%. There's full agreement. So, like, when you're saying that, the energy in my heart is thumping really intensely. It's going really warm. It's like almost like an embrace energy. Absolutely. What I'm getting as like a caveat is what's needed. The momentum moving in that direction requires a greater release from where we spend most of our time on our screens. So if we go and move throughout, what I'm getting is like when we walk through our day, we will find multiple points of data that confirms that humanity is creating a better future. But when we stop and we switch on the phone and we check news or socials or whatever it is that we do, it's going to paint a different picture. And so people that are right on the cusp of like believing and aligning um, that a softer generation is possible, a kinder generation is possible, there has to be there's more of like uh, a disciplined turning off of what's trying to convince them otherwise. Does that make sense?
Yes. So rather than that being a negative thing or rather than that being a, like, checking out, it's more of a choice point. Would that Does
Yes.
that make
Yeah.
sense?
Total choice point. Choice is still the deciding factor between all of this. Is what I'm getting. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Anything else that you see as you're in this space that would help individuals who want to create a kinder, better, better for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
future, anything that we need to know about that process that would be helpful to us?
Okay. So I'm going to frame it a different way and let me know if it's accurate. What can the individual Can we get some action steps individually that support the collective? Does that work?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. So it's really important. It's coming back to our previous conversation. It's just so that's what the records will do. It'll go to a point of reference that makes sense rather than presenting a new one. So it's going back to your example of the banana. So it's like what's most important is knowing what lane that you're in and allowing yourself to guard that lane of authenticity with the highest value that you have. So if you believe in the system that's crumbling and you want to support it as it's crumbling, infuse it with all that you want to infuse, even if it's going down. If you believe that the system's crumbling and you want to be creating the new system, let the system crumble. Let those that are there to support the crumbling be there and allow yourself to place all of your energy and attention into what is now being created as that falls apart, as one door closes, one door opens. If you know that you are someone who's meant to work on the masses and you're meant to be loud and public about what it is that you're wanting to support the becoming of, do so. And if you know that you operate better by quietly praying and meditating and offering your own energy into the new earth, then do so. But really trust that the pathway that you're choosing will be most potent when you allow your authentic nature to resonate with it. Don't do the path that others are asking you to do. Do the path that uh, aligns most intimately with yourself. And so, if you're at a place where you don't actually know what you want, this is where you start allowing yourself to set aside time to get very clear on what you feel is your heart's mission at this time. And once you lock in and get clarity with it, protect it as much as you can and stay focused on the direction that you're heading into. Does that make sense?
It does. And if for those who may not feel clear about their direction at this point of choice, does it make sense for them to do what feels correct in that moment to move forward and continue to choose the next thing that feels correct in the process?
I'm getting a no to that. I'm getting actually more to back up just a little bit before that and ask yourself first, have you tunneled in into your own self enough and you're like plateaued, like you don't actually know anymore. In which case you're meant to go external and resource teacher, mentor, trusted source to help you figure out your own blind spots and work through them. If you've been externalizing and bouncing from teaching to workshop to online training to retreat to and you're doing all the pinging and taking and absorbing, then and you're still unclear, then that's the signal to pause and let yourself go into the inner landscape and go into the quiet cave of yourself to work that through. So the first point when someone's unclear is, do I need to go internal or do I need to go external? And then once you have that identified, that's where you're playing with first. To then be like, okay, if I'm going internal, what's the first breadcrumb, like you mentioned? Like, do I follow the first, like, what is the first thing? Okay, maybe it's like setting a timer on my phone 4 times a day to have a 30-second pause of silence and breathing. Maybe it's setting aside a practice of some sort, journaling, meditating, walking in nature, harmonics, frequencies, sound, bathing, to allow yourself to connect to the space within you that's beyond this physical nature. If it's the opposite, if it's the external, really pay attention to the signals that are saying, check this person out, listen to what they have to say, and notice how it lands in your body. Notice how you feel about it. Notice how you hear the languaging. Notice your own knowing, and then keep staying in their company until you resource all that you need from them to be able to then go on and lead your own authentic self forward.
So, as we think of the new earth, and a lot of times when I hear it described, when I hear, you know, as things are moving and shifting and changing, we're actually bringing in more of this softer living, this less over processed, over um, programmed experience. And it feels like in order to do that, we need to start practicing that.
Mm.
And we need to actually be practicing slowing everything down. So is there any advice or any thoughts about like how we would go about doing that, particularly during this time when there's still people running 100 miles an hour and we still might feel this need to compete with that energy?
It's interesting. It's coming through in two different forms. Some of it is like a choice point to slow down, and I'm also getting that it's going to be it'll be forced upon some people. So, some examples that are coming through is like, the organics of how we're unfolding with AI. Some people are going to be without a job and just forced into a total dead stop, whether they like it or not. The rate of like those that are phonetically spinning, that's going to reach an endpoint as well. It's going to be a forced stop, like exactly what I have experienced in the last 6 months. It's like body shut down, can't get out of bed. So it's an absolute full stop guess you're gonna have to hang out with yourself even more and see what's there, right? So it'll be a for some, it'll be a forced stop. How it becomes a dance rather than a problem is allowing it to be a part of the dance itself, allowing it to be like, this is not, there were days where definitely I fully felt trapped in my body, and it was like, I can't, if this is my life, like, this is not a life. And I also knew that this too will pass, and tomorrow I'm gonna have the optimism and the hope or come in. So let what wants to arise, arise, and remind yourself that you're in the dance of it. It is not a forever experience that you're having. Okay.
Yeah.
And those that are being more proactive, I don't even want to say that word because it sounds like the others are being distracted. But those that are being invited to slow down before the chaos hits, before the crisis hits, it's going to get really basic. It's like actually tasting your food when you're eating it.
Mhm.
Um, Allowing yourself a micro pause before you start the engine as you're finishing one appointment before you go to another, and allow yourself that transitionatory time between um, appointments. If you work online, schedule in a 15 to 30-minute pause between clients so that you can release, reset, and upload. Uh, those that are already on the trajectory, uh, don't be intimidated by the depth of how the experiences are going to be leading you. So, like if you practice yoga nidra, for example, and you experience sleep, you might start to experience deep, deep states of rest while still being awake, and that might be like incredibly wild to your mind to be able to hold both at once. If you do psychedelic journeys, they're going to take you to some wild places. It's almost like we've underestimated where we can go as in this human body, and we're being shown what else is possible. So, um, allowing yourself to know the line between the snap, right, the breaking point, and like the invitation to go deeper. And that's not for me to sort of vocalize
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
strangers. And then those that, and everything is also cyclical. So, like, as you're experiencing, you're processing, you're integrating, don't forget the final piece of how it gets released back out. So you don't have to be an energy healer or worker to be offering and sharing. Show up in a different capacity as a mother, as a wife, as a husband, as a lover, as a partner, as a business partner, as a friend, as a stranger. Watch how this is being influenced. And then there's also just like another piece of like, just go through all the spices on the spice rack. So if you're doing the energetic work and it's not working, don't be afraid to go to your doctor and just get like basic things tested, like hormone levels and like exhaustion of adrenal glands and things like that. Like we get so caught up when we're in this spiritual conscious conversation of like, I'm not doing it right. One of the things that I just recently I was like, okay, I'm gonna try the estrogen patch, which is not in my wheelhouse of operation, but holy cow, it is doing tremendous things for my um, impatience and my frictional energy that I have that I really thought was me not getting it as well
Mm.
as I could. And now it's like, oh, it's like nervous system regulation and hormone regulation that I need more of. I'm not advocating that everyone has to do that, but just be open to all the layers of the self that need to be addressed in order to create the chrysalis into the butterfly.
Beautiful. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for
Mm.
your time and sharing that with us. And then, do you have a process then of closing the records?
Yeah, I'll just do my little closing mantra. We give thanks and gratitude to the keepers of the Akashic Records for their guidance, their healing, their knowledge, their wisdom, their information that they've shared with us today. The records for humanity are now closed. They're now closed. They're now closed. Deep breath in and out. And then, even just to reflect back, like in a microcosmic way, like the previous version of me prior to this interview being asked to open up for humanity in the collective, there's like almost like a intimidation, almost like a pressure of a responsibility that usually comes over me when I'm asked to do bigger openings like that. And I'm just having it reflected back to me in the moment, and that's why I'm sharing it. But like this last several months of me just being asked to just slow the F down and just get really soft, that whole experience for me was almost like tearful in how gentle and graceful and elegant and felt in my system. And that's the part of me that wants more of me. And so, fuck it, if I gotta go through, like, being bedridden for a few weeks or months to be able to access that part of me, that's the part that I think was coming through with, like, it might feel uncomfortable, it might feel intimidating, but if you have a deeper layer that knows that this is for the best for you, then see if you can have the courage and bravery to stay with it and watch it unravel itself through you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. One of the questions I like to ask all my guests, and a couple of things at the end here is,
Mhm.
what are some of the spiritual practices that you enjoy that help you stay connected? And how can people find you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so spiritual practices I find are very, like, life dependent. So, like, this is me with, like, I got a 10-year-old and 2 kids, like, one's graduating, one's university, okay? This isn't my spiritual practice when I had toddlers running around and biting my ankles, okay? So where I'm at today is I usually, will spend a few minutes in the morning before I get out of bed, allowing myself to repeat an I am statement. So right now my I am statement is I am love, and I just allow myself to feel it on a cellular level. I'll get up for a little bit. Sometimes I'll get up, have a drink of water, use the washroom, and go back to bed, and I'll do a lying yoga nidra, lying down. And sometimes I'll get up and get my kids out to school, and then I'll go back and I'll lie down and do that nidra. It's not every day, but that's where I'm at right now. And then what I usually try and do is have like a midday pause because I find my phonetic energy revs up around 3 to 4 in the afternoon. And that's where I can get frictional and tight. So I'll have a moment where I'll either put my feet on the grass. That's what I'm doing right now. Before it was I would go for a hike in nature. Um, Maybe I'll sing some days, but just something that's like, again, just a reset. And then I'm very boundaried with my stop time in the evening. So my kids know that don't ask me to do anything for you past 7:30, 8 p.m. I won't help you with homework. I won't help you with getting your clothes washed. That's my cutoff time. And then I'm trying to, kind of be moving in the transitionatory time for bed around 9.
Yes.
So it's a combination of like, yeah, like not just spiritual practices, but boundaries for the mental, dietary for the physical, movement for the physical, like trying to blend as many different modalities in. And some days it's a fuck show and nothing happens. And then where people can find me is my website's just my name, Heather Ivany, IVANY.com. Everything's on there from free to self study to join me live or go on a retreat. Whatever you want to do is there. My only social handle that's really active is my Instagram, and it's just my name, Heather_Ivany. But always reach out. I love hearing from people and open to having whatever conversations we need to have. Thanks, Julie.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here today. I've kept you so long, and I just appreciate your patience and your willingness to be here with us. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's great. I loved how you took your time and you really massaged our way where we were going so that people could really stay with the current of the conversation. It was beautiful. Thanks for having me, Julie.
Thank you.
Take care.